The room went silent the moment my CEO slid the termination letter across the conference table. But what burned me wasn't the paper. It was his son sitting beside him, wearing my badge around his neck like he'd earned it. "Effective immediately, Elise," my CEO said, tapping the folder as if he were doing me a favor. "We're eliminating redundant positions." Redundant. After I spent 4 months training his son to do the job he still couldn't grasp. My throat tightened as the team stared at me, shocked, while his son avoided my eyes like a coward. Security appeared at the door as if I were a threat. I couldn't even move. I just watched him smirk, watched his son's leg bounce nervously, watched my career dissolve in front of everyone who'd respected me. The humiliation washed over me so hard it felt physical. I'd given this company everything, and now I was being erased like I'd never mattered at all. That was the moment I realized exactly what they'd done to me. And it's why the next quarter, I owned the startup they needed to survive. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching my revenge story from. I want to know how far it has traveled. My name is Elise Dalton, and before that moment, I thought I understood betrayal. Had no idea. What happened that day didn't start in that conference room. It started months earlier, with a favor I should never have agreed to. Because the day his son walked in with a cheap latte and a clueless grin, my CEO told me, "Just teach him what you do." Easy stuff. Said yes. And that yes cost me everything. I was a senior operations analyst, 32 years old, supporting myself while paying off student debt after a messy breakup. Everything I'd built was tied to this job, and the CEO knew it. He knew I had no safety net, no backup plan. That's why he felt safe using me. In my car, I sat shaking, staring at the termination packet in my lap. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. I reread the paperwork, trying to make sense of it, when something caught my eye. Timestamp. The document had been prepared 3 weeks before the CEO asked me to train his son. 3 weeks. My stomach dropped. This wasn't a sudden restructure. This was planned. They decided to fire me before I even started training Colt. The realization hit like ice water. Every smile, every great job mentoring him. Every late night I stayed to help Colt understand systems he'd never actually need to know. It was all theater. I was being used to transfer my knowledge so they could discard me cleanly. The CEO's exact words echoed in my head now, twisted and sinister. "Just teach him what you do, not help him learn. Teach him everything so I'd become unnecessary." I thought back to the day Colt first arrived. The CEO had walked him into my workspace, hand on his shoulder, grinning like a proud father at a school event. "Elise, this is my son, Colt. He's going to shadow you for a while, learn the ropes. You're the best we've got, so I'm trusting you with this." Colt gave me an awkward wave, barely making eye contact. He wore expensive sneakers and a brand new laptop bag that still had the tags. "Hey," he mumbled. I smiled politely, already feeling the weight of what this meant. The CEO leaned in, lowering his voice like we were conspirators. "Between us, he's not really into this, but I need him to understand the business. Just show him the basics, nothing too complicated." He nodded. What else could I do? He was the CEO. Colt sat down at the empty desk beside mine, pulling out his phone before I even finished explaining the first task. Training Colt was exhausting. I'd explain a workflow system I'd spent years perfecting, and he'd nod while scrolling through social media. I'd ask if he had questions and he'd say, "Yeah, makes sense," without looking up. But when the CEO walked by, Colt suddenly became interested, leaning forward, taking notes, asking thoughtful questions he'd never actually wanted answers to. The CEO would beam, patting Colt on the back. "See. Natural talent." Meanwhile, I stayed late finishing the work Colt was supposed to be learning. My workload doubled because Colt couldn't be trusted with anything real. Then I found out he was being paid more than me. It slipped out during a team lunch when someone mentioned salary bands. Colt made $18,000 more annually than I did. For doing nothing. I went to HR the next day, trying to stay calm, professional. The representative gave me a practiced smile and said, "Compensation is determined by many factors. The CEO personally approved Colt's rate. That's when I started protecting myself. I began documenting everything I'd built. Every workflow system, every forecasting model, every cost reduction strategy. I worked on my personal laptop at home, making sure everything I created outside company hours belonged to me alone. I backed up files, saved emails, timestamped my work. Colt noticed I was pulling back. He'd ask me to double-check his reports and I'd say, "You've got this." His confidence wavered. One afternoon he cornered me in the break room, voice low. "My dad said you wouldn't be around long anyway." He said it casually like he was mentioning the weather. My blood went cold. Kept my face neutral. "What do you mean?" Colt looked uncomfortable, realizing he'd said too much. "Nothing. Just, people move on." But I knew. They were already planning my exit. That same week, I received an email from a startup I'd consulted for months earlier. The subject line read, "Interested in working together again?" Back in the present, sitting in my car with the termination letter, I checked my phone. My LinkedIn was already buzzing. Former coworkers were messaging me privately, shocked by the news. One message stood out. It was from Marcus, a colleague I trusted. "They're saying the company's entering a new phase. But between us, everything's falling apart. Colt's supposed to launch the new system next week, and it's nowhere near ready." I stared at the message. The system launch was my project. I'd spent 8 months building it. Colt had observed, asked basic questions, and now he was responsible for delivering it. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt a strange calmness. They'd made a catastrophic mistake, and they didn't even know it yet. I opened the email from the startup and typed a response. "I'm available. Let's talk." Months earlier, before everything fell apart, I'd done a weekend consultation for a small startup called Apex Innovations. They were scrappy, ambitious, and building something genuinely interesting. A supply chain optimization platform that could revolutionize logistics for mid-sized companies. I'd helped them structure their operational framework during a 2-day workshop. The founders, Nathan and Priya, were sharp and driven. They'd stayed in touch, sending occasional updates about their progress. Now, sitting across from them in a cramped coffee shop, they looked more serious than I remembered. "We're scaling faster than we expected," Priya said, sliding a folder across the table. "We need someone who can build systems that won't break when we grow." "That's you." Nathan leaned forward. "We can't pay you what you're worth right now, but we can offer equity. Real equity, not token shares. We want you as a long-term partner, not just a consultant." I looked at the offer. It was risky. Startups failed constantly. But something about their conviction felt right. Before the firing, I'd started saying no. It was small at first. The CEO asked me to stay late to fix something Colt had broken, and I said, "I have plans tonight. Colt can handle it." The CEO's face tightened, but he nodded. Colt panicked. He sent me 3 emails that night asking for help. I didn't respond. The next morning he looked exhausted. "I figured it out," he lied. He hadn't. The system was a mess. I didn't offer to fix it. Later that week I caught Colt at my desk after hours, leaning over my laptop. "What are you doing?" asked sharply. He jumped, closing the screen. "Just checking something. My computer's slow." I didn't believe him. The next day I reviewed my file access logs. Colt had copied several of my proprietary models. Files I'd built on my own time, that weren't company property. But he didn't know I'd changed the formulas. The files he stole were useless, rigged to fail if anyone tried to implement them. The CEO called me into his office the next afternoon. He didn't ask me to sit. "Elise, I've been hearing concerns about your attitude lately. You've been less collaborative." I stayed silent. He continued, voice dropping to something almost fatherly. "I know change is hard. But this company is evolving. You need to decide if you're evolving with it." It was a warning wrapped in corporate speak. He was telling me my future wasn't guaranteed. I nodded once. Understood. That evening the startup called. Nathan's voice was urgent. "We got the verbal commitment from our lead investor. They want to move fast. Are you in?" I looked around my apartment, at the life I'd been clinging to out of fear. "I'm in," I said. The relief in his voice was immediate. "We'll send the contract tomorrow. This is going to change everything, Elise." I believed him. 2 days before the firing, I noticed the CEO and Colt whispering intensely near the conference room. When I walked past, they stopped abruptly. Colt looked nervous. The CEO smiled at me, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Morning, Elise." The office felt strange that day. People avoided eye contact. Conversations stopped when I approached. I checked my calendar and saw a new meeting invitation. Team restructure discussion. No agenda. No details. Just a time slot for the next morning. I knew what it meant. That night, I printed copies of all my documentation. I saved every email, every timestamp, every piece of evidence that showed what I'd built independently. I wasn't sure what I'd need it for yet, but I knew I needed protection. Barely slept. When morning came, I dressed carefully, professionally. If they were going to humiliate me, I'd at least look composed. I had no idea how bad it would actually be. The meeting started exactly on time. The entire team was there, sitting around the long conference table. I was the last to arrive. The CEO gestured to an empty seat directly across from him. Colt sat to his right, wearing my security badge on a lanyard around his neck. My badge. The one I'd used for 3 years. He wouldn't look at me. The CEO opened a folder slowly, deliberately. "Thank you all for coming. As you know, we're always looking for ways to optimize our operations." He glanced at me. Sometimes that means making difficult decisions about redundancies. I felt everyone's eyes on me. The room was suffocating. He slid the termination letter across the table. "Effective immediately, Elise. We're eliminating your position." My ears rang. Someone gasped. The CEO kept talking, but I couldn't hear him. I stared at Colt, at my badge hanging around his neck, and I understood. They hadn't just fired me. They'd replaced me. With him. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, unable to move. My phone buzzed constantly. Messages from coworkers expressing outrage, confusion, sympathy. I didn't read them. I stared at the building, at the windows of the office where I'd spent 3 years proving myself. I wasn't sad. I was furious. But more than that, I was determined. I wasn't going to collapse. I wasn't going to beg for my job back. I was going to build something so strong they'd regret every second of what they'd done. I picked up my phone and called Priya. "I'm ready to start immediately. What do you need?" Her response was instant. "We need everything. Can you come in tomorrow?" I smiled for the first time since the meeting. "I'll be there." That night, I used part of my severance to buy myself a month of financial breathing room. Then I started planning. Not revenge. Strategy. Apex Innovations operated out of a converted warehouse with exposed brick and second-hand furniture. It was nothing like my old office, and I loved it immediately. Nathan and Priya met me at the door, both looking slightly anxious. "We're so glad you're here," Priya said. "We've been drowning." I spent the first day auditing their operations. They'd built something genuinely innovative, but their execution was chaotic. Workflows overlapped, data entry was inconsistent, and their forecasting model was dangerously flawed. By the end of the week, I'd identified the core problem. Their entire system relied on manual processes that wouldn't scale past 50 clients. They had 73. "You're already breaking," I told them during a strategy meeting. "But it's fixable." I spent the next month rebuilding their operational framework from the ground up. Nathan and Priya watched in amazement as efficiency improved by 38% in 3 weeks. "How did you do this so fast?" Nathan asked. Smiled. "Because I've done it before." The more I worked with Apex, the more indispensable I became. I wasn't just fixing problems. I was anticipating them. I redesigned their client onboarding process, automated their reporting systems, and built a forecasting model that actually worked. Priya pulled me aside one afternoon. her expression serious. "We're meeting with our investors next week. They're deciding whether to fund our Series A round. They want proof that we can scale." She hesitated. "Nathan and I talked. We want you in that meeting. We want them to see that you're not just a consultant. You're part of the foundation." I attended the investor meeting, presenting the operational framework I'd built. The investors asked sharp questions, probing for weaknesses. I answered everyone confidently, backed by data. When the meeting ended, the lead investor shook my hand. "You've built something impressive here. We're moving forward." Priya hugged me. Nathan grinned. And I realized something. For the first time in years, I felt valued. 2 months after I joined Apex, Nathan and Priya invited me to a private meeting. They looked nervous. "We want to offer you something," Nathan began. "Equity. Real ownership. Not just shares, but a voice in how this company grows." Priya added, "We wouldn't be here without you. We want you to be a partner, not just an employee." I stared at the offer letter. It was more equity than I'd expected. Enough to make me a significant stakeholder. "Why?" asked. Nathan smiled. "Because you've earned it. And because we're not stupid enough to let you go." I signed the contract that afternoon. For the first time since the firing, I felt like I was building something that couldn't be taken from me. That evening I checked my old company's LinkedIn page out of curiosity. They'd posted an update, navigating exciting changes as we streamline our operations. The comments were brutal. Former clients were complaining about missed deadlines and unresponsive support. I closed the app and didn't look back. 3 months after my firing, my old company was unraveling. Marcus messaged me regularly with updates. The system launch had been a disaster. Cold stolen files, the ones I deliberately sabotaged, caused cascading failures across their operations. Clients were furious. 2 major accounts had already left. The board was demanding answers. "They're blaming Colt," Marcus wrote. "But everyone knows the CEO's protecting him." Then I received an email that made my stomach drop. The subject line read, "Long time, need your insight." It was from the CEO. I stared at it for a full minute before opening it. The message was brief, almost casual. "Elise, hope you're doing well. We're navigating some challenges here and could use your expertise on a consulting basis. Let me know if you're available." I laughed out loud. They'd humiliated me publicly, stolen my work, and now they wanted me to fix their mess. I deleted the email without responding. Let them drown. A week later, Apex landed a major investor who wanted to meet the team personally. During the meeting, he kept directing questions to me, impressed by the operational stability I'd created. "You've built something most startups don't achieve until year 3, he said. "How?" I explained my approach, emphasizing sustainable growth over rapid scaling. He nodded approvingly. When the meeting ended, he pulled Nathan aside. I couldn't hear their conversation, but Nathan's expression told me it was good. Later, Nathan called me into his office, grinning. "He wants you to represent us publicly. Press releases, investor meetings, the works." My name appeared in Apex's next press release as Chief Operations Officer and Equity Partner. Within hours, my old co-workers saw it. My phone buzzed with messages of congratulations and shock. Colt tried to message me on LinkedIn. I deleted the request without reading it. The CEO emailed again. This time the subject line read, "Urgent, please respond." I archived it. They'd made their choice. Now they'd live with it. For months after joining Apex, we were thriving. Revenue had doubled. Client retention was at 94%. Nathan and Priya were already discussing the next funding round. But my old company was collapsing. Marcus sent me a final message. "The board's furious. They're demanding answers about why everything's failing. Colt's been removed from operations. The CEO's on thin ice." Then came the email I'd been waiting for. It wasn't from the CEO this time. It was from his board chairman. "Ms. Dalton, we find ourselves in need of a strategic partnership to stabilize operations. Your current organization, Apex Innovations, has been recommended as a potential partner. We'd like to discuss terms. I read it twice, then forwarded it to Nathan and Priya. Nathan called me immediately. This is huge. They're desperate. We can name our terms. I smiled slowly. Then let's make sure those terms are ironclad. The meeting was scheduled for the following week. I walked into my old office building feeling strangely calm. The receptionist recognized me, eyes widening. Ms. Dalton. I didn't know you'd be. I'm here for the board meeting, I said smoothly. She nodded, flustered, and directed me to the executive conference room. The same room where I'd been fired. I sat down across from the CEO, who looked like he'd aged 5 years and 4 months. Colt wasn't there. The board chairman opened the meeting. Thank you for coming, Ms. Dalton. As you know, we're facing operational challenges that require external expertise. He nodded. I've reviewed your situation. Apex is interested in a partnership, but our terms are non-negotiable. The CEO shifted uncomfortably. What terms? I slid a folder across the table. Full operational control during the transition period. No interference from existing management. And a public acknowledgement that this partnership was initiated at your request, not ours. His face drained of color. The CEO tried to argue. These terms are unreasonable. We need flexibility. Leaned back. Then find another partner. But we both know there isn't one. You've burned through client trust, and your systems are failing. Apex is your only option. The board chairman cleared his throat. She's right, Victor. We don't have leverage here. The CEO looked at Colt's empty chair, then back at me. For the first time I saw something break in his expression. He'd gambled on nepotism and lost everything. Fine, he said quietly. We accept your terms. I didn't smile. I simply pulled out the contract. Then let's make this official. The board members whispered among themselves, but I could read their faces. They weren't discussing the partnership. They were discussing whether the CEO should remain. By the time the meeting ended, I knew his days were numbered, and I felt nothing. Not satisfaction. Not vindication. Just clarity. 2 weeks after signing the partnership, the CEO was removed. The board voted unanimously to replace him with an interim leader. Colt quietly left the company. His title revoked. I wasn't involved in those decisions. I didn't need to be. Their collapse was inevitable the moment they chose ego over competence. The interim CEO reached out personally to thank me. You saved this company, Elise. I hope you know that. I didn't respond with false modesty. I know. The partnership moved forward smoothly. Apex integrated the company's operations under my framework, stabilizing their systems within 6 weeks. Clients started returning. Revenue slowly recovered. But the culture shift was permanent. The new leadership made it clear. Competence mattered more than connections. Meanwhile, Apex continued growing. Nathan and Priya promoted me again, this time to partner and co-owner. My equity stake gave me genuine influence over the company's direction. I wasn't just an employee anymore. I was a decision maker. And I'd earned every bit of it. 6 months after the firing, I stood in my new office at Apex's expanded headquarters. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. My name was on the door. Partner. Owner. Chief Operations Officer. I built this. Not through manipulation or favoritism, but through competence, strategy, and refusing to accept being undervalued. Priya knocked softly, entering with 2 cups of coffee. Thought you could use this. Smiled. Thanks. She sat down looking thoughtful. Do you ever think about how close we came to not working together? If they hadn't fired you. They did me a favor, I interrupted. I was staying somewhere I wasn't valued because I was scared to leave. They forced me to bet on myself. Priya nodded. Well, I'm glad they were stupid enough to let you go. We'd be nowhere without you. I sipped my coffee, looking out at the city. For the first time in years I felt completely at peace. A year after the firing, I received one final email from the CEO. He'd been quietly pushed out, his reputation destroyed. The subject line simply read, "I was wrong." Opened it. The message was short. "Elise, I underestimated you. I thought loyalty meant silence, and competence could be replaced with convenience. I was wrong. You deserved better. I hope you've found it." I read it twice, then closed my laptop. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. He'd made his choices and I'd made mine. His apology didn't change the past, and it didn't affect my future. I'd already moved on. Later that afternoon, Nathan called a company-wide meeting. Apex had just closed our Series B funding round at a valuation 3 times higher than projected. The team erupted in cheers. I stood at the back, watching the people I'd helped build this company with, and I realized something. I didn't need to destroy my old company. I didn't need revenge. I just needed to build something better. Today, I co-own one of the fastest-growing startups in our industry. My equity is worth more than I ever made in salary at my old company. But the real victory isn't financial. It's walking into work every day knowing I'm valued for what I contribute, not just what I'm willing to tolerate. The CEO's company eventually stabilized under new leadership, but they never recovered their reputation. Colt moved to a different industry entirely, and I stopped checking their updates months ago, because my life isn't defined by what they took from me. It's defined by what I built afterward. I learned that loyalty without respect is exploitation, that competence speaks louder than connections, and that sometimes, the best response to being undervalued isn't fighting to prove your worth to people who refuse to see it. It's walking away and building something so valuable that they end up needing you more than you ever needed them. I didn't need to destroy them. All I had to do was build something better. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in such a situation? Please share below and subscribe to this channel for more stories like mine.